You know what's
Wow,
funny
where did you
about
get those
power?
outfits?
Real power doesn't announce itself.
Do you like them?
It doesn't need to.
We've been planning this
It walks
all
into a room
morning.
quietly, sits in the corner, and watches. And that's exactly what Maya had been doing for years. But let me take you back. Before the wedding. Before the chaos. Before everything changed. Maya wasn't always the woman in the simple black dress, standing at the edge of ballrooms while people whispered about her. No. There was a time when Maya's name meant something in the corporate world. When her signature on a contract could change someone's entire future. When boardrooms fell silent the moment she walked in. She had built an empire. Not inherited it. Not married into it. Built it. From the ground up, with her own two hands, her brilliant mind, and a work ethic that would make most people weep. By the time she was 32, Maya had created one of the most innovative consulting firms in the country. A company that specialized in saving failing businesses, in turning desperate situations into success stories. She was the person CEOs called at 3 in the morning when everything was falling apart. She was the one who walked into companies on the brink of collapse and somehow, impossibly, brought them back to life. She saved jobs. She saved families. She saved legacies. And then, one day, she walked away from all of it. Just walked away. People couldn't understand it. Her colleagues thought she'd lost her mind. The business journals wrote think pieces about burnout and the pressure on women in leadership. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any of them could guess. Maya had looked around at her life, the penthouse apartment, the designer clothes, the endless galas and networking events, and realized she didn't recognize herself anymore. She had become someone who was always performing. Always on. Always proving something to people whose opinions didn't actually matter to her. So she made a choice that seemed crazy to everyone else but made perfect sense to her. She sold her company, set up her team with everything they needed to continue without her, and disappeared into a life so quiet, so simple, that most people would find it boring. She moved to a small apartment filled with books. She volunteered at a community center. She took long walks in parks where nobody knew her name. She learned to paint badly and didn't care. She baked bread. She read poetry. She remembered what it felt like to breathe. And for 3 years, Maya lived like this. Anonymous. Peaceful. Free. That's the woman Daniel Whitmore fell in love with. How they met. Daniel met Maya in the least romantic place imaginable. A used bookstore on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. He had ducked in to escape the rain, shaking water from his expensive coat, annoyed at his driver for dropping him off 2 blocks early. He was between meetings, stressed about a merger, thinking about 1,000 things that seemed important at the time. And then he saw her. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the philosophy section, completely absorbed in a book, her hair falling across her face. She had on jeans with paint stains on them and an oversized sweater. No makeup. No jewelry. She looked real. In a way that nobody in Daniel's world ever looked. He found himself walking over. Is it any good? She looked up, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were so clear and intelligent that he felt like she could see right through him. Through the expensive suit, through the practiced charm, straight down to whatever was actually real inside him. Depends, she said simply. Do you actually want to think about the nature of existence? Or are you just making conversation? Most people treated Daniel like he was made of gold. They laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. They agreed with everything he said. They wanted something from him. Always. Maya looked at him like he was just a person. Maybe not even a particularly interesting one. He was fascinated. They talked for 2 hours in that bookstore. About philosophy, yes, but also about art and music and whether it's possible to really know another person. She had opinions, strong ones, and she didn't soften them to make him comfortable. When he name-dropped a famous author, she called him out. You didn't actually read that book, did you? You read the summary. She was right. He hadn't. Daniel left that bookstore with her phone number, a stack of books she insisted he actually read, and the feeling that he'd just met someone who might actually see him. Their relationship grew slowly. Not through grand gestures or expensive dates, but through conversations that lasted until dawn. Through quiet walks where they didn't need to fill every silence. Through the way she challenged him to think deeper, to be more honest with himself, to care about things that mattered. Maya never asked about his money. Never wanted to go to fancy restaurants or exclusive events. When he tried to impress her with his wealth, She'd just look at him with this gentle amusement that made him feel like a child showing off a drawing. "Daniel," she once said, "I don't care what you have. I care about who you are." And slowly, carefully, he showed her the real him. The man beneath the billion-dollar name. The person who sometimes felt lonely in rooms full of people. Who wondered if anyone would love him if he lost everything tomorrow. Maya loved that man. The real one. That's what made everything that came next so painful. The first 6 months into their relationship, Daniel asked Maya to meet his family. She knew it was coming. She'd been preparing herself. Because here's what Maya understood that Daniel, in all his privilege, couldn't quite grasp. His family was going to hate her. Not because of anything she did. Not because of who she was. But because of what she represented. Someone from outside their world. Someone who hadn't been vetted and approved. Someone who didn't come from the right family or the right background. Someone they couldn't control. The brunch was held at the Whitmore estate. Because of course it was. The kind of place that had a name. Where the driveway alone was longer than most city blocks. Where servants moved like ghosts and every piece of furniture cost more than a car. Maya wore a simple dress. Elegant but understated. Her natural hair. Her minimal jewelry. She wasn't trying to compete with their world. She was just being herself. That was her first mistake, as far as they were concerned. Catherine Whitmore, Daniel's mother, greeted them in the sitting room. She was tall, thin, perfectly put together in that way that wealthy white women master, where everything looks effortless but actually requires a team of people and hours of preparation. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Maya," she said, taking her hand limply, as if afraid something might transfer through the touch. "How lovely to finally meet you. Daniel has told us so much." The emphasis on much was intentional. A little weapon, delivered with a smile. "It's wonderful to meet you too, Mrs. Whitmore," Maya said warmly, genuinely, because she refused to play these games with anything less than grace. Victoria, Daniel's sister, was worse. She was getting married in 2 months, and she made sure everyone knew it, constantly referencing her wedding, her dress, her special day. When she looked at Maya, her eyes did this quick scan, head to toe and back again, that Maya had seen 1,000 times before. The assessment. The judgment. The dismissal. "Oh," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "That's such a unique dress. Very simple. I love how you're so confident to just wear anything." Maya smiled. "Thank you. I believe in not trying too hard." The implication hung in the air. Unlike you. Brunch was exactly as awful as Maya had expected. Every conversation was a minefield. Catherine asked pointed questions about Maya's people and where she came from. Victoria made comments about how exotic Maya looked and how interesting her features were. Compliments that weren't compliments at all, but rather reminders that Maya was different, other, not one of us. When Maya mentioned she liked to read, Catherine said, "Oh, how wonderful. Education is so important, especially for people from backgrounds where it might not be emphasized." Maya could feel Daniel tensing beside her, his jaw tightening. He jumped in, his voice sharp. "Maya has a master's degree from—" "It's okay," Maya said quietly, touching his hand. Because she knew something he didn't. Defending her would only make it worse. These people fed on reactions. They wanted to see her upset, to see her as emotional, as unable to handle their world. So instead she smiled. She answered their invasive questions with grace. She let their little barbs bounce off her like rain off glass. And inside she recognized every single tactic. Because Maya had sat in boardrooms with men who tried to intimidate her. She'd faced down investors who thought she was too young, too female, too black to know what she was doing. She'd built her empire by refusing to be rattled, by staying 3 steps ahead, by being so undeniably excellent that eventually, they had no choice but to respect her. These people, they were amateurs compared to what she'd already survived. But there was one key difference. Those boardroom battles had been about business. This was about whether she was worthy of love. Whether she deserved to be part of Daniel's life. And that cut deeper than any corporate warfare ever could. As they left, Daniel was fuming. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "They were awful. I didn't think they'd be that bad. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to. Daniel, Maya said softly, stopping him. They were exactly what I expected them to be. That doesn't make it okay. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But you need to understand something. To your family, I will never be enough. Not because of anything I do or don't do, but because I'm not from their world. And that's a reflection of them, not of me. He looked at her with such pain in his eyes. I love you, he said fiercely. Doesn't that matter? Of course it does, she said, meaning it. But love doesn't erase reality. Your family will never accept me. The question is whether you can live with that. He pulled her close, holding her tight. I don't care what they think. I choose you. And Maya wanted to believe him. She really did. 2 weeks later, the formal invitation arrived. Victoria and Marcus's wedding. The social event of the season, apparently. 500 guests, 3 days of events, a price tag that could feed a small country. And Maya was invited. Sort of. The invitation had Daniel's name on it, with a small, almost reluctant, +1 beside it. Not Daniel and Maya. Just +1. As if she were interchangeable. As if she didn't have a name. You don't have to go, Daniel said immediately. After how they treated you at brunch, I completely understand if... I'll go, Maya said. He looked surprised. Are you sure? Maya thought about it. She could stay away, avoid the discomfort, the subtle cruelties, the feeling of being constantly evaluated and found wanting. It would be easier, safer. But Maya had never chosen easy. And something in her, maybe it was pride, maybe it was love, maybe it was just stubbornness, refused to be chased away by people who thought their money made them better than her. I'm sure, she said. Besides, I want to see who you are in that world. All of you, not just the version that sits in bookstores with me. So Maya prepared. She chose her dress carefully, a simple black gown, elegant and understated. Not trying to compete with the wealth around her, but not apologizing for herself either. She would be exactly who she was, a woman who didn't need diamonds to shine. The night before the wedding, Daniel held her close. Whatever happens, he whispered, I'm on your side. Always. And Maya believed him. Because Daniel was a good man. A kind man. A man who genuinely loved her. But love, she was about to learn, isn't always enough to protect someone from a world determined to destroy them. The morning of the wedding, Maya stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself in that simple black dress. She took a deep breath. Let's go, she said. And they drove toward the Whitmore estate, toward Victoria's perfect wedding, toward a day that would change everything. Maya had no idea that in a few short hours, the family that looked down on her would be on their knees. That the man getting married would walk past his own bride to bow before her. That every assumption, every insult, every cruel little comment would come crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. She just knew one thing. She would face whatever came with grace. Because that's what real power looks like. You ever notice how the worst moments of your life happen in the most beautiful places? How cruelty loves to dress itself up in silk and pearls. How the sharpest knives are always served on silver platters. That's what Victoria Whitmore's wedding was. Beautiful. Breathtaking. And absolutely brutal. The Whitmore estate had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. White roses everywhere. Thousands of them. Crystal chandeliers hanging from tents that cost more than most people's houses. A string quartet playing softly as guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos mingled on manicured lawns. It was perfect. Picture perfect. The kind of wedding that would be featured in magazines that people would talk about for years. And Maya felt like an intruder from the moment she stepped out of the car. The stares started immediately. Not obvious ones. These people were too well-bred for that. But Maya could feel eyes sliding toward her, then quickly away. Could see the slight pauses in conversation as she passed. Could hear the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. That's her. Daniel's girlfriend. I heard she's from. And then a meaningful pause, filled with all the things they wouldn't say out loud. Daniel's hand tightened on hers. Ignore them, he muttered. But how do you ignore 100 tiny cuts? How do you pretend you don't notice when every single person in a room is evaluating whether you belong there? Maya held her head high and smiled. Because she'd learned a long time ago, when people want to see you break, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse. They found their seats for the ceremony, carefully placed at the back, Maya noticed. Not with the family. Not even close. As if proximity to her might be contagious. But before the ceremony started, that's when things really began. Victoria's bridesmaids descended like a flock of designer-clad vultures. They were all the same type, tall, thin, blonde, with that specific look of women who'd never been told no in their entire lives. Their dresses probably cost more than some people's yearly rent. Their jewelry could fund a small business. And they looked at Maya like she was dirt on their expensive shoes. "Oh my God," one of them said, her voice carrying that particular tone of fake sweetness that Maya had come to recognize as a weapon. "Your dress is so interesting. It's very simple. Did you make it yourself? That's so resourceful." Translation: Your dress is cheap. You don't belong here. Maya smiled warmly. "Thank you. I believe in letting who you are speak louder than what you wear." Another bridesmaid, this one with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, leaned in. "And your hair. It's so natural. I love how you're just so comfortable being, yourself. That takes such confidence." The emphasis on natural and yourself wasn't accidental. Maya had heard these coded comments her entire life. Compliments that weren't compliments. Observations that were really judgments. Translation: Your black features are being noted. You're different. You don't fit our aesthetic. "I appreciate that," Maya said, her voice steady, kind even. "Authenticity is important to me." A third bridesmaid, emboldened by the others, went for the kill. "So, how did you and Daniel meet? I mean, you're just so different from the women he usually dates. It must be such a culture shock for you, being around all this." She gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. There it was. The real question beneath all the others. How did someone like you end up with someone like him? Daniel's face had gone red. He opened his mouth, probably to say something he'd regret, but Maya squeezed his hand gently. She'd handle this. She always did. "We met in a bookstore," Maya said simply. "We connected over ideas, over conversations that mattered. Revolutionary concept, I know, liking someone for their mind." The implication hung in the air. Unlike whatever you all are doing. The bridesmaids' smiles faltered. One of them laughed, too loud, too sharp. "Well," she said, "at least you have a sense of humor about it all. That's so cute." And then they drifted away, leaving their poison behind. Maya could feel Daniel vibrating with anger beside her. "I'm going to say something," he said. "I'm going to." "You're not," Maya said quietly. "Because that's what they want. They want a scene. They want proof that I can't handle their world. So I'm going to sit here with Grace, and we're going to get through this day, and then we can talk about whether I ever need to see these people again." He looked at her with something like awe. "How are you so calm?" "Because I've survived worse," she thought. "Because I've sat across from men who tried to destroy my company and smiled while I outmaneuvered them. Because I've built empires while people told me I couldn't. Because I learned a long time ago that grace is armor, and dignity is a weapon these people will never understand." But what she said was, "Because losing my temper won't change their minds. It'll just prove them right." The ceremony began, and Maya tried to focus on the beauty of it. The flowers. The music. The way the afternoon light filtered through the trees. But she couldn't stop noticing Marcus, the groom. He was standing at the altar in his custom tuxedo, looking exactly like what he was. Old money, good breeding, the kind of man who'd had every advantage from birth. Handsome in that conventional way. Confident in that specific manner of people who'd never had to question their place in the world. But as Victoria began her walk down the aisle, as everyone stood and turned to watch the bride in her $20,000 dress, Marcus wasn't looking at his future wife. He was looking at Maya. And there was something in his expression, confusion, recognition, disbelief, that made Maya's stomach tighten. He knows me, she realized. He knows who I am. But how? In her years of running her company, she'd dealt with hundreds of businesses, thousands of people. Could he have been? The ceremony proceeded. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Marcus kissed Victoria, but his eyes kept drifting back to Maya, his face growing paler, his expression more distressed. Something was wrong. Maya could feel it building like a storm. The guests moved toward the reception tent, chattering excitedly. Cocktails were served. The band began to play. It should have been perfect. That's when everything fell apart. It started with a commotion near the entrance. Raised voices. Security moving quickly. And then a reporter, someone who'd clearly crashed the wedding, being physically escorted out, shouting as he went. Discrimination. They called her the help. The Whitmores are racists. This is going viral. You can't silence. And then he was gone, but his words hung in the air like a bomb. Maya felt every eye in the tent turn toward her. Because she was the only black woman there. The only one who could possibly be the help they were talking about. Daniel's face went white. What is he talking about? Maya already knew. She'd heard it earlier, when she'd gone to the restroom. Two servers had been talking, not realizing she was in one of the stalls. Did you see that black woman? Apparently she's with Daniel Whitmore. No way. I thought she was catering staff. Someone told me she was the help. Catherine Whitmore said something about how those people are always trying to social climb. Someone had leaked it. Someone had told the press. And now it was out there. Maya's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. She pulled it out and saw her social media exploding. The hashtag Whitmore wedding was trending. Screenshots of texts. Claims of racism. The story spreading like wildfire. Around them, guests were checking their phones. Gasping. Whispering. Some were already heading for the exits, not wanting to be associated with a scandal. Catherine Whitmore appeared, her perfect composure cracking. This is a disaster, she hissed to someone nearby. Our reputation, the foundation, the business connections. Victoria was in tears, her perfect wedding crumbling around her. How could this happen? On my day. My day. The tent was in chaos. Guests leaving. Press trying to get in. Security overwhelmed. The Whitmore family in full panic mode, watching their carefully constructed image collapse in real time. And in the middle of it all, Maya stood perfectly still. Dignified. This is what happens, she thought, when you build your world on looking down at others. Eventually, it all comes down. That's when Marcus moved. He'd been standing with Victoria, supposed to be comforting his crying bride. But suddenly he stepped away from her. His face was pale but determined. His eyes were fixed on Maya. The room gradually quieted as people noticed. Because there was something strange happening. Something no one could quite understand. Marcus walked across the ballroom floor. Past his mother. Past Victoria, who called his name in confusion. Past all the important guests. He walked straight to Maya. And then, in front of 500 people, in front of cameras that were still rolling, in front of his family and his brand new wife, Marcus dropped to his knees. The silence was deafening. "Boss," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You saved my life." "Boss." The word echoed through the room like a gunshot. Daniel's hand tightened on Maya's. She could feel him looking at her, confusion and dawning realization mixing on his face. Maya looked down at Marcus and remembered. 5 years ago. A struggling tech startup run by a young man drowning in debt, on the verge of suicide. She'd taken him on as a client when no one else would. Had restructured his entire business. Had mentored him through the darkest period of his life. Had believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. She'd saved his company. And yes, probably his life. "Marcus," she said softly, "stand up." But he shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "You need to know. Everyone needs to know. That day you called me, I was writing my goodbye letters. I was done. And you said..." He took a shaky breath. "You said, I see something in you worth saving. Let me help you see it too." The room was completely silent now. Every phone was recording. Every eye was watching. "I was nobody," Marcus continued. "Broke. Failing. ready to end it all. And you believed in me. You restructured my entire business. You taught me everything. You turned my company around. Within 2 years, we were profitable. Within 4, I sold it for $50 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine Whitmore's face had gone gray. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth open. And I never knew how to find you to thank you, Marcus said. You disappeared. Everyone said you'd retired, gone off-grid. I've been looking for you for years. And here you are, at my wedding. And these people, his voice hardened. These people who have no idea who you are, what you've done, how many lives you've changed, they treated you like you were nothing. He finally stood, but he kept his eyes on Maya. Maya Chen, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Founder and CEO of Phoenix Solutions. The woman who saved 37 companies from bankruptcy. Who created over 10,000 jobs. Who turned around businesses that everyone else had given up on. The name hit the crowd like a physical force. Phoenix Solutions. Even people who didn't follow business news had heard of it. It had been legendary. And Maya Chen had been a ghost story in the business world. The brilliant woman who'd built an empire and then vanished. You're that Maya Chen? Someone gasped. Daniel was staring at her. You never told me, he whispered. You said you worked in consulting, but you never. I didn't want to be that person anymore, Maya said quietly. I wanted to be just me. Marcus turned to face the crowd, his voice ringing with authority. The authority of the man Maya had helped him become. This woman is worth more than everyone in this room combined. Not in money, though her company sold for $300 million, but in character, in integrity, in the lives she's touched. He looked at his new bride, at his in-laws. And you called her the help. Catherine Whitmore looked like she might faint. Victoria had sunk into a chair, her face buried in her hands. The guests were pulling up articles on their phones now. Old business journals. Forbes features. The legendary story of Maya Chen, the consultant who never failed, who disappeared at the height of her success. And there she stood, in her simple black dress. The woman they'd dismissed. The woman they'd insulted. The woman they'd thought was beneath them. The most powerful person in the room, and she'd never had to say a word. Maya could have destroyed them in that moment. Could have accepted Marcus's praise and ground the Whitmore family into dust with her words. Could have listed every insult, every microaggression, every cruel little comment. She could have been vindictive, angry, triumphant in an ugly way. That's what they expected. But Maya had never been interested in meeting people's expectations. Marcus, she said gently, today is about you and Victoria. This isn't. Yes, it is, he interrupted. This is exactly what today should be about. Truth. Recognizing what matters. Not money or status or who comes from what family, but character. Quality. The content of someone's soul. He turned to Catherine and Victoria. You judged her. You treated her like she was less than you. And why? Because she didn't wear the right dress? Because she didn't come from the right family? Because of the color of her skin? We didn't, Catherine started, but her voice died. Because everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. Maya touched Marcus's arm. Thank you, she said, for the recognition. But I don't need an apology from them. I don't need anything from them. She looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. At the man she'd fallen in love with, who was a good person, but who lived in a world that would always see her as an outsider. Can we go? She asked softly. He nodded, still looking stunned. Yes. Let's go. As they walked toward the exit, the crowd parted. People stepped back. Some were taking pictures. Some were trying to apologize. Some just stared in awe or shame. Victoria's voice rang out, desperate. Maya, wait. I didn't know. If I had known who you were. Maya stopped, turned, and for the first time that day, let a little bit of steel show in her voice. If you had known who I was, she repeated. So if I'd introduced myself with my net worth, you would have treated me with respect? That's your apology? Not that you shouldn't treat anyone that way, regardless of who they are. Victoria's face crumbled. The problem, Maya said, her voice carrying across the silent room, isn't that you didn't know I was successful. The problem is that you thought success gave you the right to treat others as less than human. That's not about me. That's about who you are. And then she left. Walked out of that beautiful, awful wedding with her head high and her dignity intact. Daniel was quiet on the drive home. Processing. Understanding, maybe for the first time, what she'd been trying to tell him about his family, about that world. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "for not fully understanding. For not protecting you better." "You can't protect me from a system," Maya said. "You can only choose whether you want to be part of it." "I choose you," he said immediately, "even if it means losing them?" He didn't hesitate. Especially then. The story went viral, of course. #Whitmore Wedding dominated social media for weeks. Think pieces were written about class, race, assumptions. The Whitmore family's reputation took a hit it would take years to recover from. Marcus called Maya the next day. Apologized for the scene, but not for the truth. Asked if they could have coffee, catch up properly. She said yes. Victoria sent flowers. Then a letter. Then another. All of them saying essentially the same thing. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I judged you." Maya never responded. Because some apologies come too late. Some damage can't be undone with pretty words and expensive bouquets. Catherine Whitmore never apologized at all. Some people never do. But here's the thing about that day, about that story. It's not really about Maya's success. It's not about her money or her company or her past achievements. It's about something deeper. It's about every person who's ever been underestimated. Every person who's been judged by the color of their skin, their accent, their clothes, their zip code. Every person who's been made to feel small by people who confused wealth with worth. It's about the quiet strength of dignity, the power of grace under pressure, the truth that real class has nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. Maya went back to her quiet life. Her books. Her small apartment. Her anonymity. Because that's what she'd wanted all along. Not to be defined by her achievements, but to be free to be fully human. Daniel went with her. They're still together, last I heard. Building a life based on what actually matters. Love, respect, genuine connection. And somewhere in that life, Maya is still who she always was. Not the powerful CEO, not the woman who saved companies, not the viral sensation from that wedding. Just Maya. A woman who knows her worth doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. Who can walk into a room full of people who think they're better than her and know, with absolute certainty, that their opinions say everything about them and nothing about her. That's real power. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Doesn't need to prove itself. Doesn't need validation from people who've never learned to see beyond surfaces. The kind of power that kneels before no one, but makes others drop to their knees in recognition of truth. So the next time you see someone who looks out of place, who seems too quiet, too simple, too different for the space they're in, remember Maya. Remember that the quietest person in the room might just be the most powerful. That grace is armor. That dignity is a weapon. And that you never, ever really know who you're talking to. Treat everyone like they might be extraordinary. Because they just might be. And even if they're not, even if they're just ordinary people living ordinary lives, they still deserve your respect. Your kindness. Your basic human decency. That's the lesson. That's what this story is really about. The woman they called the help taught them all something that day. You can have all the money in the world and still be poor in the ways that actually matter. Don't be poor in those ways. Be more like Maya. Thank you for experiencing this story with me. I hope it moved you. I hope it made you think. And I hope in some small way, it reminded you to treat every person you meet with the dignity they deserve. Because you never know who they really are, or what they've survived, or what quiet power lives beneath the surface.